Hey everyone, this is your captain speaking, and we are definitely cruising now. This is video 4 of my series on the 1000-year Dragonrider portal of 2020. That's a long title. I think I'm going to use it though. Anyway, I think I want to just dive right in. We've been covering a lot of ground, and in this video, this is more for the astrologers out there. It's totally for everyone. And I think you can just listen without looking at the screen if you're not an astrologer. I don't want to distract you with, I'm going to show some charts. We're going to move through time. We're going to go a week at a time until next year, just to give you a flow for the year and give you a flavor for what's happening. I want to point out a few key things and talk about some things. I've got some charts. I want to look at Trump's chart real quick, and we'll look at his transits real quick. And I've got a few other charts we're going to look at. We're going to look at the presidential, the election day chart, the chart for election day for the United States election later this year. And we'll also look at the inauguration chart for 2021. When that president's been elected, they get inaugurated on, I think it's the 11th. I'll pull the chart up. The 11th of January, I believe. Maybe it's a little later. So, okay. You can see that the sun is set, and this powerful alignment. Can you feel it coming in here? That's 5 planets in Capricorn. This is an energy about working. I think it's about getting focused, getting real, getting serious, and working, getting organized. Starting to get organized for the push up to base camp, where you get to raise your baseline consciousness and clear out the darkness and be a beacon of light. That's what we're talking about later this year. The push to base camp is March and April. And on a global scale, it's likely to be an intense month. And we're going to look at that. So let's just go forward here. How do I get it set up? Whoop. So this is January 14th. You can see by then that the Sun and Mercury are the other end here in the conjunction of 5 planets, this 5-planet conjunction. Sun and Mercury at the end rather than where they are now, which is at the beginning. And so they're kind of moving off by then. A week from now, there's going to be a strong sense of this feeling of beginnings for the year, really beginning strong with a new decade in a very definite direction that seems to have a lot with revealing shadow, revealing the dark side so that it can be integrated. And then because it's integrated, it releases all this energy, and that energy becomes light. Once you process the dark, you become the light. Once we as a collective process the repressed material, the trauma material, the shadow material, there's no evil people, but there are evil energies that sometimes humans express. And so there's something about acknowledging that there's a dark side to every human being, and there are forces of darkness that we have to learn to not act out, to manage well, and also see when others are acting out those energies and call them on it and resist their expressions of the shadow. Resist them, stand up to them. I think that's partly what we're seeing in the impeachment situation, impeachment of Donald Trump. And maybe this is the moment to bring out Donald's chart here. Just have to remember which one it is. Maybe it's this one. That's the presidential inauguration. Is it the 4th one? Here he is. Here's Donald. We'll come back to this one. And remember, dark humor is a theme for the coming year. You got to be able to laugh about things and also feel deeply all the complex emotions, including despair. So what am I looking at here? Oh, that's March. We're going to look at that chart. But here's Donald with the chart on the outside is where things are right now. And we can look at his chart over here on its own. Let me move it a little bit. Maybe this will be better. So I'm not going to do a full chart analysis for Mr. Trump. I think maybe I will in a later video go into more depth, but I just want to point out very briefly that the most painful part of his chart, I feel, most likely, I think there's a couple things going on in this chart that could be really painful and traumatizing, where that part of the chart has a shadow version that can have something to do with some real pain. And in this case, I'm talking about the Saturn-Venus conjunction over here. Saturn-Venus conjunction over here and over here. And you can see over here, this is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sky that the Sun and Mercury are coming onto and Jupiter's coming onto. So the whole thing, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, with these interplanet activations, it's all lining up opposite the Saturn-Venus conjunction in his chart. And Saturn-Venus can be very noble. It can be so classy. It can have this kind of loyal lover energy where it's just like willing to love one's flaws and love the flaws of others in a very kind of mature and wise way. Most of the people that you would know that have this are probably like that. And if you have it yourself, that's probably you. A mature, wise, loyal lover to yourself, flaws and all, and lover of the other in terms of their flaws and limitations, and a kind of capacity to love past judgment, where love overcomes judgment. Well, there are more painful versions of Saturn-Venus where there seems to be more of a lack. Saturn can block things, a lack of love, a lack of kindness, and where the person who's born with it is maybe on the receiving end of that, a kind of cold-heartedness, which seems to be true in terms of Donald Trump's father. Not that I want to psychoanalyze anything here, but it seems like he was kind of cold-hearted towards Mr. Trump and traumatizing in different ways. I don't know the details, but it's clear to me. He had a painful childhood, and that somehow closed off his heart. I think it was so extreme that he lost contact with his own heart. And yeah, there's a kind of Grinch who stole Christmas quality to right now, the way that things are playing out. I mean, we just had a nice Christmas. We just celebrated the new year. And wow, what a bummer, that it's all about him. It's all dominating the news, his impeachment and his new war. I mean, yeah. So he doesn't seem to have the ability to love other people well because he doesn't love himself well. Well, this part of his chart that probably has issues around rejection, like really triggered by experiences of rejection. Well, that part of his chart is being visited by this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and it's exact within 1 degree on his Saturn, and it's within 3 degrees of his Venus. I mean, that's a major activation of his chart. And for many other people, it could be a profoundly healing transit, maturing and transforming transit. And it doesn't seem like that tends to happen with our president. It doesn't seem to mature so much as decompensate. I think that's what we're seeing. And so, yes, I don't think this is a great transit for us to kind of expect He will not take actions out of his own trauma. The impulse to make other people feel the way he feels inside, whether he's aware of it or not, that impulse, that often unconscious impulse to make other people feel as bad as you feel, that's a dangerous feeling, because this is a moment where he's being the most rejected as possible on an epic scale. Well, the only way he could be more rejected is if he were actually removed from office, which doesn't appear to be likely, but who knows what's going to happen in the coming weeks. What I predict in general on a political level is the most epic year of political and global drama that maybe any of us have ever seen. It already seems to be playing out that way. And I want to point out that the Watergate situation came to a conclusion under Saturn square Pluto. And yeah, when Nixon resigned right after the smoking gun tapes came out a few days later, it was August 8th, 1974. Tight Saturn square Pluto. And there's something about that combination that has to do with crime and punishment. Crime and punishment, where Saturn is consequences and Pluto is extreme, an extreme force of nature, where there is a force of justice in the heart of nature. There is a force of justice in the heart of nature. And with consequences, where there's been great crime perpetrated, there can be major punishment under this Saturn-Pluto configuration. We see it in Harvey Weinstein going to trial right now, as likely our president will go to trial. And there's all these other trials and Supreme Court decisions. And this is likely to be a kind of dominant motif for the year, kind of epic, titanic political struggle, and the potential for like global tectonic shifts and changes. I sometimes call the Jupiter-Pluto cycle of time the United Nations archetype. The quality of the Jupiter-Pluto cycle can feel a bit like a massive United Nations process, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, Jupiter opposite Pluto. This kind of epic global drama that clearly is unfolding. It's been happening. I mean, this is a moment where we're just reflecting on these themes, the themes of billionaires controlling the resources of the planet. Billionaires controlling the resources of the planet. That's a Jupiter-Pluto-Saturn theme. It's a time to be meditating on this. And yes, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. Epic scale political dramas and international drama. You know, the ongoing situation between Trump and Russia, whatever's going on there, and now what's going to unfold in the Middle East, and with Brexit in England unfolding, and yes, drama ahead. I think we can predict that. And it's all lining up on Donald Trump's most challenging part of his chart. What that means, whether he's going for a defeat, there's certainly that version I could see with transits like this, certainly. And yet it's also a very dangerous person when they're heading towards total defeat. So there's Donald. We can look at this more another time. He's getting Neptune square his sun and moon this coming year. That actually can bring some compassion. That could be a transit that's very interesting. Once in 40-year transit of, here you can see it here, Neptune in 16 Pisces is, well, it's like 6 degrees square is Sun, 4 degrees square is Moon, but Neptune's moving up to 20 this year. And so, yeah, that's a big transit. That's a very different character. It can certainly make someone more sensitive, and it can bring confusion. It can bring, a kind of fragile energy that could play out very differently in different people, obviously. He's already apparently very sensitive, but this one could come in and kind of increase that and maybe increase his own sense of being lost. Yeah. So, okay, I'm not going to say any more about this person. Let's put away Donald's chart and let's put this away here. And I think maybe as a corrective, let's see. Let's see, is it this one? Yes, here she is. As a corrective chart, let's look at J.K. Rowling. Let's see, how many of these are there? We'll do that. Yeah, okay. I just want to point out that J.K. Rowling is born with Saturn opposite Pluto and with both the moon on one side and Venus on the other. So it's like, I think she represents a kind of Dragonrider consciousness where a Dragonrider is able to have a certain kind of power of love, a love force that's so potent that it can conquer a dragon. It can tame a dragon. The love force is so great that it can tame the dragon. And I think in the story of Harry Potter and his friends Hermione and Ron and Dumbledore and Miss McGonagall, Minerva, yes, in this amazing story, we can see someone who is looking at darkness, looking at evil, and looking at it in a very political way that I think really resonates with what's going on. I mean, we have a situation where the Ministry of Magic has been taken over and the dark arts are reigning, and yet we have a defense against the dark arts, and we have friendships, and we have love for each other, and there's a kind of persevering love that Venus, Saturn, like, oh, it's very interesting. We're looking at someone else who has Venus, Saturn. Trump has it, but J.K. Rowling also has it. There's this kind of strong heart, courageous heart, energy that Venus, Saturn can be, especially if you add Pluto, which adds a kind of force of nature. It's like where love comes down into the darkest, deepest reaches of the underworld and stares the Death Eaters in the eye and stares he who shall remain nameless in the eye, and love wins. Love wins. And so I think that's the message we're talking about. J.R.R. Tolkien also has Venus trine Pluto. Venus trine Pluto Neptune is a Pluto-Neptune conjunction. But Venus, like that power of love, the love force of Sam for Frodo and Gandalf for everybody. That love, the Galadriel love that gives the light of Eärendil, their most precious star. And what's our most precious star? It's the sun, and how we're this incredible relationship with the sun. And that's part of what we're reflecting on right now with the sun conjunct Saturn and Pluto. Okay. I'm going to run through some things more rapidly now. Where was I? What am I doing? I'm bringing this up. Hello? Is it over here? It's here. Is that it? That's the chart for March. And this is for, okay, so I want to just kind of quickly go through the year here, a week at a time. And this is 1 week from now. This is 2 weeks from now. By then, the Sun and Mercury are fully off. the Saturn-Pluto. So by the 21st, we'll have been through a major initiation into what is coming this whole year. The Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto energy will be fully in us, and we'll have a sense of where we're going with it. We'll start to feel a pull of what's possible with it. And that's going to pull you on your move towards base camp. We're at the trailhead now, and we're gathering our supplies, and we're heading to base camp. We're getting our fellowship of closest friends and support around us, and we're preparing to make a pleasant hike to base camp. I mean, it could be strenuous. It may involve a bit of a workout, but it's a good workout. The kind that gives you a flow state where you're just trying to get a little bit better, work a little bit harder, and move a little bit more passionately day by day. That's what we're talking about. Putting a little more oomph in your, as we head towards base camp in March. I want to point out here at the end of January, Venus coming on to Neptune over here in Pisces. That's a very helpful energy, kind of a healing balm for the heart as we come out of these conjunctions to Saturn and Pluto. Yes. I want to be sure to say something that I'm not positive I've said so far. I think I have earlier, but I want to make sure to reaffirm that the Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter triple conjunction this year has a lot to do with coming into this new understanding of what's happening with the death of nature and how the earth is suffering and how humans are suffering upon the earth. It's the awareness of that, but then it's this really strong impulse to fight and protect nature. And I'm thinking of Greta Thunberg. Her chart, she's born under the last Saturn opposite Pluto, the one that was in 2001 to 2003, which of course, that's when the Iraq war began and the Afghan war began and 9/11 happened. That's the opposition. That was the full moon. Now we're at a new moon phase in the Saturn-Pluto cycle. Before the opposition, there was the conjunction of 81 to 83. That period, where there was talk of World War III and there was talk of nuclear apocalypse. It was the height and climax of the Cold War. It's a serious energy we're talking about. And where there's a kind of deadly serious feeling, a kind of gravity to the situation, often is brought in under these Saturn-Pluto alignments, especially the new moon and full moon phases of these cycles of time are so powerful. And so, yes, the Venus-Neptune is going to feel like a healing balm for the heart. It's the heart chakra portal, and it's the Kuan Yin portal, and it's where we raise up into our fourth chakra and above, and we look at life through the eyes of love, as opposed to the eyes of fear. And then if we keep going forward, look at this. January 27th, Moon, Venus, Neptune triple conjunction. Right after sunset, look for this in the sky. Lovely Moon, Venus conjunction. That's around January 27th. I would look both the 26th and the 27th. That whole area, it's going to be beautiful with the crescent moon right near Venus. Okay. And then we go another week forward. And by here you can see the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto in early February is coming within the 10-degree range. And you can see Mercury's moving towards Neptune. The Sun is eventually heading towards Neptune. Eventually, much later in the year, Mars will come over here. So there's this whole sequence of Neptune conjunctions throughout the year that I really want to encourage people to be tuning into. At the same time we're riding the dragon, we need to be in touch with the divine, the sacred, with inspiration, with bliss, with, yes, divine inspiration. That's what we're talking about. Being in touch with your higher self, being in a higher frequency state of consciousness, it helps when Neptune is activated, when a new cycle of time with Neptune begins. There is this potential for catching a spiritual wave that can really up-level your experience, and that's going to be very helpful when we've got this super epic dragon energy that we're working with all year. Taking a drink. Yes, okay. Yes, okay, let's go forward. So now we're at February 10th. You can see Mercury is coming into conjunction with Neptune. That's what I'm calling the psychic download portal. And then February 17th, Mars is starting to approach Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And I want to start to remind you here, and I'll be sending out reminders later, but by the time we get to February 17th, you should be trying to observe Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars if you can, because this is, for me, the way we are connected with nature. It's the way we move with the earth. It's the way we stay connected to the earth. At the same time, we remain in contact with the sky and in contact with the planets, the other planets, by directly observing them, by taking in the reflected light of the sun, those photons that bounce off of the planets and then come back to our eyeballs. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. That's how you do the real sacred ritual and reach out to the heavens and let the heavens reach back to you and receive what they send you, the planets and the stars and so forth. Yes, so starting in February, in the couple hours before dawn, the 90 minutes or so before dawn, you can be looking for Jupiter and Saturn above the eastern horizon, where the sun will rise 90 minutes later. You can be looking for the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and also Mars coming onto it. And for the rest of the year, there'll be these pulses of the moon conjoining it. Every month, the moon will come onto the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and that'll be awesome to observe every time. It'll look amazing. You can only have that happen once every 20 years. Observe a moon-Jupiter-Saturn triple conjunction. Every 20 years, for certain months of the year, that happens. And this one includes Pluto, although you can't see it, and there are going to be times during the year where Mars is on it, as I said earlier. So, yes, 90 minutes before dawn, look for this to be lining up. Here's February 24th. Mars is starting to get about 15 degrees away from these three here, and by then you can see how tight the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto is getting. It's within 9 degrees. It just stays, it doesn't go further than 9 degrees separate for the rest of the year, all the way until next February. Okay, or next January anyway. You can see here that the new moon in February is conjunct Mercury and Neptune. This is a strong Pisces time. And we go 7 days later, early March, you get the Sun-Neptune conjunction, which is very helpful for staying in contact with your spiritual higher self. At the same time, this is where you get to base camp. Early March, time to make that push to base camp. The month of March, you are both pushing to base camp and arriving at base camp and kind of adjusting to the higher altitude from that point forward until a later part of the year. I mean, it could just continue from that point, a kind of building, climb to your personal mountaintop for the year. Yes, but I'm thinking that there might be a kind of pause after April, May, June, July. Not a pause exactly, but maybe a kind of diminishment of the intensity of it. We get some retrograde planets in there, and I think there'll be a little bit of a respite from what I think is very intense energy straight through from now through the end of April. I just think this energy is going to sweep us forward in the big first wave. We're going to pause a bit, and then there's going to be another push as you get to September, October through February. Okay, we're going to look at that. Okay, but look at what's happening in March. The whole month, Mars tight quadruple conjunction. This period around March 17th, you can see here's where the moon comes into a 5-planet conjunction. 4 visible planets conjunct: Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. That's very rare. This is a very, very rare alignment. And it's happening both here in mid-March, and a month later, the moon comes back to a broader 5-planet alignment. Okay. There's some transits down here. Sun and Venus and Mercury will all go across Uranus later in the year. I'll have some videos about that when we get there. I just want to give you the big lay of the landscape here. And so going forward, week by week, you can see Mars is super activated in here. Of course, I would say March and April, in terms of the global situation, I think it's going to be, in some ways, one of the big peaks of the year. Whatever drama is unfolding, it's going to reach a crescendo, the first crescendo in March. And it's certainly a dangerous energy. Mars, Saturn, Pluto is definitely an energy that can be corresponding to war and attacks and explosive violence. It can also be the resistance and rejection of all that. A kind of mature control of the energy that's then channeled, Dragonrider style, towards peace, towards resisting, like with checks and balances, the corruption and violence of the world that some people act out. And so I think there's likely to be, in some ways, more expression of shadow in March and April, but also that draws forth a stronger resistance that could be very empowering as we move forward for the rest of the year. As far as this goes for the political race of the year, obviously January, February, March, huge months for the primary season. And I hope you can just feel that I sense that there's going to be big political drama, both in the election process, the primary process, but clearly in terms of the impeachment process and all the ongoing scandals that are the quagmire of scandals that are just getting bigger every day. And Saturn Pluto has a lot to do with facing scandalous situations, whether that's Harvey Weinstein or what's going on in the White House or what's going on at the border of Mexico. These kind of scandalous situations are often exposed. And so, as you get to March, a sense of a political battle growing. I haven't mentioned yet that coming in March and April, we also get Saturn square Uranus, which I'll have to talk about more deeply later. But that's an alignment that has a lot to do with restructuring things. And on a political scale, it can be really major restructuring process that's happening. It can also be one where there's divisions, where there's a rebellion of one side that's kind of entrenched in its resistance to the other side. And it can be very divisive. It was in the sky when the Tea Party first came online, that kind of entrenched radicalism and divisiveness, certainly that can fit the Saturn-Uranus energy. And so that adds to the political drama of the Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto alignment, which I've been meaning to mention, that the last time we had the most similar energy, I think I did mention this, the 2000-2001 alignment that corresponded to the Gore-Bush election and the Bush v. Gore decision of the Supreme Court. That was the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction opposite Pluto. So I'm kind of feeling that kind of drama, but even bigger is what I would expect. I mean, it's what just seems to be happening. It's not like practicing some kind of psychic divinatory astrology predicting something. It's like astrology helps you tune into what's already obvious and just bring some additional understanding to it. And so I think it's obvious that the year ahead is going to be one filled with epic political drama and international drama, the potential for international crisis, but also the potential for a kind of mass scale, deep, positive restructuring of global dynamics, national dynamics. Certainly it can be epic forces, titanic energies clashing. But out of that, nature finds its way in its evolutionary process and restructures things in their next stage of development. And so, yes, okay. Here's April 5th going forward. So now Mars is moving off of this, and perhaps a little less intensity of it. And you can see as you get into May, Mars starts to conjoin Neptune. That could be like, it's kind of like the fires going out. The fire is going out. It's like the water element, Neptune, and Mars, the fire. Like maybe a kind of softening of the aggression and a kind of a diplomatic energy. Mars, Neptune has to do with kind of Aikido master energy and a kind of Aikido skills brought to bear on political situations. Positive diplomacy, perhaps, could be something I would really expect actually this year. Really positive diplomacy and seeing how diplomacy works at like the United Nations scale. Seeing that, we're going to be witnessing big time United Nations drama this year. At the same time, we're seeing the constitutional, hopefully it's not a constitutional crisis. We're seeing how the Constitution works here in the United States in terms of the impeachment process. The United States Constitution came into being under the first Saturn-Pluto conjunction after 1776. It was there in 1785 through 87. That was the first in a series of 8 Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. Since then, including that one to now, 8 full cycles of the Saturn-Pluto cycle of time have happened since the founding of the nation. And so there's some kind of resonance between the constitutional enactment of the impeachment process, witnessing the checks and balances that are supposed to protect democracy, and seeing whether democracy will be protected this year, or will it succumb to more and more of an oligarchy, and hopefully not much further beyond that. Yes. Those are the open questions of this year. I should also mention that it is the United States Pluto return, since 1776. Pluto has gone one full cycle around the sun, a 250-year cycle, the Pluto cycle. And so Pluto has a lot to do with the shadow. It's similar to the Saturn-Pluto alignment in its power. Those two cycles of time have a lot of resonance. The Pluto cycle on its own, the Saturn-Pluto cycle, and also the Jupiter-Pluto cycle. They all include Pluto. And so there's similarity and there's an overlap and there's a sense of the United States going a full cycle in terms of the shadow history and the repressed trauma contents of U.S. history. It's all kind of coming to the surface, as well as all the successes and triumphs of the U.S. system. They're being revealed as well. And so it's both a descent into the underworld and a triumphant return from the underworld, the return of the king. And another example I've been meaning to mention is the first publication of Dante's Divine Comedy. That happened, the first printing, where did I write it down? Oh, here it is. April 11th, 1472, the first press printing of the Divine Comedy and its representation of hell, its representation of the Inferno, and the way in the Inferno there's all of these political figures and their shameful behaviors. So that was a Saturn square Pluto that was in the sky when the Inferno was revealed. And so, yes, there's the revelation of the Inferno, but there's also the triumph of the return of the light. And take people like Nelson Mandela, born with a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, or Gandhi, who's born with a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, or Eva Peron, who's born with the conjunction, or someone like Rosa Parks, who's born with the opposition. All these are humans that are representing the moral power of the universe and resisting the shadow powers of the universe. And if you take someone like Rosa Parks, when she refused to get off the bus, there was a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in the sky, the same one that The Return of the King was published under. And that moment, when she refused to get off, was a very Jupiter-Pluto, it's a very Jupiter-Pluto representation, I would say. This moral power and the way it can transform history in the direction of moral justice. And yes, these are all examples of the power of the force of good in the universe to overcome the forces of darkness. Yes, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. And getting close to wrapping things up. Yeah, I think I just want to go forward to the election real quick. That's the inauguration. Oh, this is the Aries ingress. We looked at this basically. The Aries ingress has the Mars, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn. So I mean, that's just that burst of Aries energy that comes every spring here in the Northern Hemisphere. To have that Mars alignment at the same time, it suggests to me just a really potent moment of moving forward with the year. And then after that, here's the election day. November 3rd. Let me bring this here, bring this here. Here's the election day. Mars is in a tight square to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. It went retrograde earlier in the year, and basically from this point, it just stays in the squares. Actually, I want to just take a quick look at this. Where does Mars go retrograde? Let's look at it here first. So look, starting in late July and early August, Mars is starting a very long sequence of squares to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. So we've got that period in the spring, which is the push to base camp. But by the time we get to late July and August and into the election day situation, it's like Mars is really activating the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and it's giving it its force, its yang energy, and it's inviting it to move. And so that's the time where you're kind of building more of your project. You're building more of your project, and I think it's the time where we're likely to see a really big fight go down in the political situations of the world. I pray that it doesn't correspond with war. It could easily be the resistance to war and the mature containment of that energy. Absolutely, it has been that under all previous cycles. There's more and more of the resistance to war, and yet at the same time, the powers of the military-industrial complex have been growing stronger and stronger, and so it requires more and more resistance, and that's the gift, because it draws out that level of the strong moral warriors like Greta Thunberg and many others that will be rising together throughout this year. Okay, so here's where Mars starts to go retrograde by, well, I guess here by September 11th, it's gone retrograde. And so it's just going to now retrograde back and square all these planets. And we can go forward to, you can see like here in October, exact squares. So I mean, that's the time for the workout. That's the time for the big push. That's the time to really aim to your high point that's on the middle path, you know, where you've been aiming in a very grounded, realistic way. As you get into the September, October, end of the year months, that's going to be a time where there's going to be a passionate movement of energy that feels strong and successful, and it's disciplined and it's long enduring. And so there may be some endurance tests throughout this year, but this is the time where you find out just how much endurance you have. And then you draw on that superpower of your capacity for endurance, and you keep soldiering on. You keep pushing on. The other night I heard Dead & Company play. It was the most amazing concert on New Year's Eve. Oh my God, all my old friends, Bobby and Mickey and Billy and all of them. Johnny Mayer, he can really play. He can really play, this guy. And Teal, Burbridge, oh my God. Amazing, amazing bass player. Anyway, it all came together in the most beautiful concert. And the last song they played, after 3 sets of music, they played everything pretty much. It was so incredible. But they played their most famous song from the radio anyway, Touch of Grey, which has that line, I will get by, I will survive. We will get by, we will survive. And there's this quality of survival that this overall alignment has. It's an alignment where you find your life force that is willing to survive no matter what. And through that will to survive, a discovery of resources of energy and support that you never knew would be there. And so, yes, okay, I'm going to put this chart away. And we just look at the election chart. You can see Mars squared Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto. Mercury's been retrograde leading up to the day. It goes direct on election day, and it's opposite Mars, and it's been squared to Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. That's happening. I mean, the likelihood of just a really intense war of words and the use of language and the manipulation of the media and the misuse of journalism, all of that, which we would already expect to be there, is certainly amplified here in this chart. It's a very strong theme of negative, dark communications about your opponent and receiving their destructive communications, and it can be a kind of moral force of resistance that resists that impulse to destroy with words, to label others as bad or evil or wrong. It can be a kind of mature gravitas that's able to resist that. So, yeah, and the other chart I've got here is the inauguration chart. You can see that Mars is in exactly the same place, just 5 degrees away from where it is on election day. So it just stays in these squares to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. So the likelihood of a kind of political battle continuing from there, I mean, I think it's going to be epic, whatever happens politically. I don't know. It certainly could be similar to what happened in 2000, where somebody uses their power to manipulate the election. I hope that doesn't happen. It could equally be the triumph of democracy and the smooth transition of power. Let's pray for that, shall we? Okay. I think I've covered it. Let me just look at my notes, and then I'm going to wrap this all up. I think we've covered it. We've looked at the whole chart. We've looked at that. And yes, 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 lighting the beacons. Rally the Rohirrim. Yay, I think we covered it, everybody. What a journey we've been on. What a journey it's been. Talking about this Dragonrider portal of 2020. Ride the dragon, everybody. Let's keep it real. Let's stay grounded. Let's act mature. Let's keep our shit together. And yes, thank you all for hanging in there as long as you did with me. And we'll continue to have portal updates. If you like this, please hit the like button. It helps me out so much. Please leave comments, give me feedback, ask me questions, let me know how the portal's going for you. I'd love to hear all of that. And yes, please share if you know anyone that might appreciate this. And if you haven't subscribed, this is the biggest thing. I would love to welcome you aboard my starship. If you just subscribe and hit the notifications bell, you will be notified when there's a new video. And lastly, I'll just say this again. I am offering a special promotion for the next few weeks. Please go to my website at www.stels.biz, and at the bottom of every page, there's an email list sign-up form. And I would love it if you'd sign up there. Then you'll get my newsletter, you'll get notified of special promotions and other special things that I won't announce on all my other Facebook pages and whatnot. Please, please, please sign up for my mailing list, because I'd love to be able to communicate with you that way. And that is all. Blessings, blessings, blessings. The promotion involves a discount off of my fees, so check it out.